All right, you big cats and kittens. Looks like we're going live direct from a big cat rescue down in Florida. Just kidding. Any of you who don't get that, you really need to get on your Netflix subscription ASAP. I wanted to start this off by just sharing a little bit of where I'm shooting from today. I'm shooting from Los Kitcheneros. It's a beautiful place in our home since we only have about 12 places to visit. Los Kitcheneros is where it's a very exotic location where sometimes we have different types of cuisines and foods. Amazing. This morning we did a pita stuffed egg sandwich with apple sausage. Just wanted to get started here. Today we're going to be focusing on Bien Nacido Chardonnay. And Bien Nacido Chardonnay is probably one of our hallmarks and our classic wines that we make from the vineyard. Bien Nacido has a ton of different plantings of Chardonnay all throughout, including some of those that come from the flatlands, where it gets a little bit warmer, tends to have a little bit heavier soils, where we have the bench, just like we have it in Burgundy as well. This morning, look, I'm talking over myself. Just like in Burgundy, where we have a bench portion, and then we have some hillside plantings as well. Obviously, if you think about Burgundy, the best productions are those ones that are right in the middle of the slope, right? So you have medium density soils here, heavier soils on the bottom, the most sun exposure. Everything that we have is facing south and west. But specifically, Bien Nacido Chardonnay. This one here, the one that you can see is created with a special factory label. It was drawn by a local artist. I believe her name is Katie Kemp. This is our 2018 vintage Bien Nacido Chardonnay. Literally came off the bottling line about 3 weeks ago. We haven't even put the labels on it yet. In fact, we're creating the new labels as we speak. And I wanted to get into it. Bien Nacido Chardonnay for us is a single block production. We have one block located in Bien Nacido as far east as you can get. It's called W Block. It is planted entirely on its own roots, which if you understand what that means, it was never grafted onto any other rootstock, which means potentially we have the issue of phylloxera, nematodes, or other vine pests that can infect the root system. But currently we don't have any of those. This only comes from the oldest rows. So in Bien Nacido, originally we planted on 12-foot spacing, really wide apart, back in 1973 when these were planted, so almost 50 years ago. Now we've gone back, and in the late 90s, early 2000s, we planted in between, but this only comes from those old vines, 1973 own-rooted Chardonnay. The cool part about it, it is as far east as you can get, so it picks up the most wind that can come through that wind funnel for us and gives us a new opportunity to kind of create that savory minerality to it. One of the things I was going to share with you guys here is the new labels that we are doing, and the new labels are kind of cool. Let's see if we can share these live for everybody. Cool. So the new labels are actually going to be for us something that's not required in Santa Barbara. If you're familiar with the wines of Sonoma County, Sonoma does have conjunctive labeling, which means that if you put on your label something like Santa Maria Valley, you also have to put Sonoma County. Now, Santa Barbara doesn't actually do that, and the sub-AVAs of Santa Barbara County are, we're right at about 7 of them right now: Santa Maria, Santa Rita Hills, Ballard Canyon, Los Olivos District, what am I forgetting? Los Alamos, which is being added currently, Happy Canyon, and San Ynez. So all of those are the 7 major regions of Santa Maria Valley. We decided, because I've gone out in the market and I've talked to plenty of people who've come to consumer tastings and they've said, oh, this is delicious. What part of Sonoma does this come from? And it doesn't. It comes from Santa Barbara. So we wanted to do the conjunctive labelings, but that's what the label should look like. If we go back and we get into the wine, this is the 2018 vintage. 2018 was a frost vintage, and unfortunately we had about 30% of our crop lost to frost. We had early bud break right around February 6th of 2018. We got a frost that came in about a week later. So those little teeny tiny buds that were coming out got completely frosted over, even despite the fact that we do frost mitigation in both wind and water, which is aspersion. We still got a bunch of frost. So we were down to what I believe in 2018, I looked at it the other day, was something like 325 cases of this wine, which is minuscule. There are producers who make more Chevalier Montrachet than us. And since Antonio Galloni called us one of the Grand Crus of California, I would say that this lives up to it. The cool thing about our winemaking is that we can see the color here. It does have a nice golden tone to it. This only sees 20% new barrel. We always use a very specific type of barrel. It's from Burgundy. We use 3-year aged staves. We use a producer called Damy, D-A-M-Y. It's what Antoine Gilbard uses on his Merceaus. And we like it because in a medium minus toast, it gives it this really sort of understated spice character, as opposed to something like Francois Frere barrels, which, don't get me wrong, are incredible barrels, but they are a big thumbprint, right? Francois Frere is kind of like Donald Trump walking into the room. He says, hey, listen to me. And so do Francois Frere barrels. Whereas something like Damy barrels, both of them, if they were medium minus toast, would have a much more delicate, subtle kind of character. I would say that this is more like the Queen of England, the Damy barrels. And so we want to use that so it doesn't add so much of an overt oak character to the wine. Now, this did see 18 months in total of aging. It's barrel fermented, so fermentation starts in the barrel. We only use natural yeasts that are found on the grapes and in the winery. It is fermented entirely in barrel. Of course, I mentioned 20% of that new. We do not do any batonnage, but this does spend a good amount of time on the lees. And in fact, if you looked at the whole barrel, we have about 25 to 30% of those as gross and fine lees as it's going through fermentation. And if you know, lees are really important for making reductive style wines. Reductive winemaking is important if you want to have older potential for vintages, but at the same time, you want to make the wines that are going to drink well, not just now, but in 5 and 10 and 15 years. Is my opinion on reductive winemaking. We also do some other things, but those barrels tend to, those barrels tend to give it an opportunity of keeping the subtlety of the oak in, and those lees use the reductive character. Now it finishes fermentation. The wine stays in barrel and goes through malolactic, on its own. And that malolactic is typically 100%. We don't have the opportunity not to do 100% of malolactic, because if you have some amount of unfinished wine and we do a cuvee and blend them together, we're going to end up with a wine that, when it's unfined and unfiltered, is going to secondary ferment in the bottle. And of course, we don't want that to happen. We've never done any fining or filtering at Bien Nacido, so it's always important for us to make sure that the wines go through 100% malolactic. The cool thing about that is that this wine has a finished pH of about 3.21. For those of you who are wine nerds, it means that this is exceptionally acidic, which is really kind of cool, because from California, you get the ripe fruit of that pineapple, that kind of golden red apple character that comes through, a little bit of that lime zest and lemon, but you get the acidity like something along the lines of Chablis, or even Champagne can have 3.2 acid. So it's cool to try them side by side with something from another region of the world. This wine specifically, I wrote some notes the other day, and I think I'll share those with everybody also. Let's see. I just thought it was cool to highlight it. This was my first taste of the wine. The very first thing I saw, I said, hailing from the historic W block, which was planted in 1973 on their own roots. This must be the most floral vintage of these wines in years. Honeysuckle, fresh apple blossoms, chamomile, which the chamomile comes in from a little bit of that oak, that kind of yellowish dandelion flower kind of thing, which is really cool. And a more demure lemon oil and citrus peel. Our wines are whole cluster pressed, and so they do tend to have a small amount of phenolics to them, and those phenolics tend to bring out that citrus peel as opposed to citrus flesh. It's really fantastic with food because it's another textural element which helps cut through the wines. Much livelier on its feet than Solomon Hills, which is our other vineyard that we make. And we can see that why this wine is going to have more potential to age. It's yummy. It's certainly aged for 18 months, as I mentioned, before it is bottled. The other thing about our wines is that we actually have low sulfur regimes all the way through. For us, we tend to want to go no more than 70 parts per million of SO2. This is dissolved and total parts per million. We like to make sure that we're following the ideals of traditional winemaking, which are organic farming, which are non-inoculated wines, which are low intervention in the winery, which are unfined and unfiltered, and then at bottling, minimal sulfur as well. So these technically do fall into the character of raw wine, which Isabelle Legeron MW has created for her sulfur standards. Now, we released this one in July 1 of this year, so it's going to spend a little bit more time in the bottle. As I mentioned, this is one of our secret hidden labels, right? Nobody can get one of these unless you want it drawn by a local special artist. What the labels typically look like is that one, but it's going to have that Santa Barbara County adjunct to it. And the cool thing is we only make like 325 cases, as I mentioned, but not every barrel is perfect. So we have some barrels that didn't make the cut. They didn't have that citrus peel, that floral quality to it, that minerality that we want to show. So we do make another cuvee. This one's called Well-Born Cuvee. For those of you who don't know what Bien Nacido is, Bien Nacido means well-born in Spanish, the name of our vineyard and estate. So we made a cuvee called Well-Born Cuvee, which essentially is our younger bottled and second selection, right? You want to keep the Grand Cru stuff for the long aging, put it in the estate bottles, and then we make this stuff. This actually does see a little bit of batonnage. It's much more towards the typical California Chardonnay, big, rich, more powerful kind of stuff. I do want to share one more thing because that Well-Born Cuvée is actually getting a facelift this year as well. Let me show you here. Let me know what you think. Post a comment what you think of our new Well-Born Cuvée label. So this is the Well-Born Cuvée. It's a little more highlighted. It's showing that character of, or the title of Well-Born Cuvée. It still is from the estate. It highlights the adobe, which is our 1857 completed adobe. Obviously is Bien Nacido estate. It's just something new. I hope you guys think that it stands enough difference compared to these two, which look almost exactly the same, right? So the Well-Born Cuvée is going to be new. Well-Born Cuvée is something we only do on by the glass programs and in on-premise. So hopefully when we open our restaurants again and we all have the opportunity to see each other and sit next to each other and share a bottle of wine, you can find some of the Well-Born Cuvée. We actually do that in Chardonnay, Pinot, and Syrah. That is it for me. I think I'm going to have the rest of my glass of wine and enjoy the afternoon. I was looking outside and I saw 3 lizards running around in my backyard already, which I'm really happy to see because those are the guys that eat the scorpions. And this year we only saw 1 scorpion the whole year we were here. So I love seeing those lizards. They're doing their job if we don't see any scorpions in the house. And I've never seen one inside. Roy Gutierrez, you did have a question. You said, does organic make a difference on flavor and taste? Now, it shouldn't, right? I mean, your organic cucumber doesn't taste any different than your non-organic cucumber, right? It just tastes like a cucumber. But I think the idea is that if you want to make sure that you're not interjecting a bunch of things into your body that are, for example, petroleum-based chemicals, you might want to use organic compounds like we do. We take our skins, we take our cuttings from pruning, and we have our own large compost pile. We do all of that. We have goats that go through the vineyard and thankfully leave behind nutrients of their own. And we have a lot of things that fix nitrogen in the vineyard. So peas and clover and beans and things like that that add those as well. Carrie, thanks for the artistry of the label. I appreciate the comment. I'm going to be doing one of these every few days. So we'll probably do Solomon Hills Chardonnay in case you want to watch them back to back. Please feel free to post comments. And if you want to buy any of this, like I said, it's coming out on the 1st of July, but we still have some 17 vintage available at biennacido.com, biennacido.com, and everything's 20% off right now. Oh, I forgot to mention the Hawaiian shirt before I close. I'm going to wear a Hawaiian shirt every day too. And this one is special for me. You can see, unfortunately, it's a little tattered, but this is one that my dad gave me. He passed away about 21 years ago, but thankfully I can still fit into his 21-year-old Hawaiian shirt. So I'll be wearing a different Hawaiian shirt every single day. We don't have to show what anybody is wearing underneath there on the bottom half, right? Because we're all on Zoom these days. So I could be wearing sweatpants, or I could be wearing tuxedo slacks, or I could be wearing a Speedo like Tiger King, Exotic Joe. All right. Thanks, guys.